an intense focus.
Let's go to another evil company, Kochava. Kochava is one of these data brokers that you're going after, right? Where people go to church and then they sell that data to commercial enterprises, right?
That's right.
That's real creepy, isn't it?
I believe most people would have that reaction, yes.
I got onto the FBI director yesterday for their creepy FISA activity, and now we have Kochava literally selling to people, oh, well, this is a Baptist, this is a Methodist, this is someone who goes to temple. Are you going to get these people and stop them?
Gentleman yielding. When the FTC attorney deposing Mr. Roque asked him to confirm that, quote, no one from the FTC directed you to reach a particular conclusion about Twitter's program, he explained to the contrary. There were suggestions of what they would expect the outcome to be. He testified that the FTC communicated to Ernst & Young. Again, Ernst & Young is the independent assessor, the fact finder that the FTC selected and made Twitter pay for, that he communicated to Ernst & Young that, quote, Ernst & Young under all circumstances will be conducting and issuing a report on behalf of the FTC order, and was very adamant about this is absolutely what you will do and this is going to occur and you will produce a report at the end of the day. The FTC was so adamant. Ernst & Young leaders feared that the FTC would take exception if they chose to withdraw from the case. So on the one hand, you're harassing Twitter, and then you're saying the guy we've selected, the entity we've selected, Ernst & Young, the accountant we've selected to be the fact finder, you better find what we want, and if you try to get out of it, we're going to retaliate against you. That is frightening. I mean, we talk about the weaponization of government. This from the same agency that said, tell us all the journalists you're talking to. That's what we're concerned about, Ms. Khan. That's what has to change. You can comment if you want, but I'm reading from the motion filed today in court. And it's amazing to me, you don't even know this guy. You don't even know who this person is, and your lawyers deposed him. He's the guy that you set up as the fact finder, and you didn't know who he was. Did you sign off on any of those 12 letters sent to Twitter in that 10-week time frame?
Congressman, we're fortunate to have a lot of work underway. A lot of this work is delegated to the frontline staff that are able to move quickly and nimbly to make sure.
Yeah, but you're in front of Congress today. You knew you were going to get questions about this. Yeah, you don't know this. I find amazing.
It sounds like it was a late-breaking development in a filing this morning. It's not something that's on my radar. I'd be reluctant to weigh in on it in this setting without looking more closely at it. Happy to take questions for the record on it and engage later.
Not on your radar that you told, based on the testimony of this guy, that he felt there would be retaliation if Ernst & Young tried to get out of the agreement. Wow.
I yield back.
Wow. Gentleman yields back. Madam Chair, why are you harassing Twitter?
Congressman, thanks for the question. As you might know, the FTC's work on Twitter goes back a decade. Back in 2000,
I'm not talking about a decade. I'm talking about now. 12 demand letters in 10 weeks, over 350 separate requests you've demanded of Twitter. Why are you harassing them?
Twitter has a history of lax security and privacy policies.
You've asked for every single communication relating to Elon Musk, not communications that he just sent to someone or communications he received, but any time he's mentioned. That actually seems more than harassment. That seems like almost an obsession. Why such an intense focus?
It was found that Twitter's lax privacy policies allowed unauthorized users to co-opt Twitter accounts, including that of Fox News. Subsequently, Twitter voluntarily entered into a consent order with the FTC.
Here's what you wrote in December, Madam Chair. Here's what you wrote in December. Identify all journalists and other members of the media to whom Twitter has granted access since Musk bought the company. You want to know the name of every journalist a private company has talked to? Think that's consistent with the First Amendment?
Congressman, as a former journalist, I take extremely seriously the valuable work that they do and understand that there can be instances in which government action is unjustifiably
particularly, Madam Chair, if I could just interject, particularly in the context here. I mean, it's bad enough if you got government asking a private company about who are the journalists you're talking to. You name 4 of them and say, we want the other names of any journalists you may, in fact, be communicating with. That's bad enough. And I think a threat to the First Amendment, freedom of the press. But in the context of giving us information about how government had suppressed speech on these platforms, That's the context you're asking for. I think that's particularly troubling, don't you?
Congressman, the consent decree that we have prohibits Twitter from sharing personal information with third parties. When we read in the papers, like everybody else, that Twitter may have granted access to third parties, that's what our teams were seeking information about. Again, this is a company whose history with the FTC goes
Madam
back
Chair,
a decade.
we got limited time. Madam Chair, who is David Roque?
Could you repeat that, Congressman?
David Roque, R-O-Q-U-E. Who is David Roque?
I'm not familiar with
You
that.
deposed him last month, June 21st, 2023. David Roque is the independent partner for Ernst & Young's independent assessment of Twitter's program. That's part of this consent decree. Do you know what Mr. Roque said in that deposition?
I'm not aware.
Okay, let me read it for you then, because I think it's pretty important. Mr. Roque testified, again, one of your lawyers, you deposed him, testified that FTC's conduct made him feel as if the FTC was trying to influence the outcome of the engagement before it had started. He said, in some of the discussions that we were having with the Federal Trade Commission, expectations were being conveyed about what those results should be before we had even begun any procedures. So they're the independent assessor in this consent decree the FTC has with Twitter, and you're telling the guy who is the person. He's the guy. He's Joe the accountant who's going to get this information. You're telling him, you're putting your finger on the scale, telling him what you want the outcome to be, and he's supposed to be the independent fact finder. Why are you doing that?
Congressman, I'm not familiar with those.
Because it was just filed today, but we are. This is filed in court today, and this is your deposition.
I'm happy to take a closer look at it and be back in touch. I will say as a general matter, we want to make sure that the assessors and auditors that are responsible for overseeing compliance are doing their job.
You saying Mr. Roque's line, what he testified here, what's been filed in court today, that there were suggestions of what they would expect the outcome to be, they being the FTC, there were suggestions of what they wanted him to go find in his independent assessment of the consent decree agreement between the FTC and Twitter.
Again, I'm happy to take a close look and we can be back in touch with you about that allegation, but our staff are consummate professionals. When they conduct these investigations, they're focused on determining whether there was a violation.
Is your attack on Twitter, harassment on Twitter, is that based on the fact that all kinds of Democrats have asked you to do this and frankly some things that you've written about dealing with, quote, disinformation? Does that have anything to do with it, Ms. Khan?
Congressman, we make only independent determinations about whether there were law violations.
The statements from Chairman Nadler, the statements from the letter, the press release and the letter from 7 Democrat senators that had no impact on it, that's not why you're doing it?
Absolutely not. We look very closely at the specific matter at hand. Again,
12 demand letters in 10 weeks telling the independent assessor, hey, put your finger on the scale. This is the results we want. That's not harassment, and it had nothing to do with the fact that every Democrat in this town seemed to be telling you to go after Twitter.
Our focus is on protecting people's privacy and security. Twitter has sensitive data on 150 million Americans, including private messages. We need to make sure, especially given its history going all the way back to 2010, we're doing everything to make sure Twitter is complying with the order.
That's fine. Don't put your finger on the scale, and don't attack the First Amendment and the rights of journalists.
Mr. Chairman,
I
want to get to those areas of agreement, but there is some ugliness we got to deal with. Now, you guys putting in the names of reporters in a correspondence to Twitter was solely predicated based on anonymous news sources, right?
It was based on reporting that we...
Right, and we would agree that anonymous reporting is not a sufficient predicate to target, to send letters about journalists who are your critics, right?
Congressman, yeah, I mean, the goal was third parties, but this is good feedback for us. We want to make sure we're not in any way suggesting that we're interested in, affecting journalists' work. It's really about privacy and security. So I
appreciate your acknowledgement that that is not the way we ought to do things. As someone who has seen ugly government action emerge out of anonymous reporting, perhaps I'm a little sensitive to that, but I'm glad that you've made that acknowledgement. Let's get on to the important work that you're doing. Millions of Americans have Ring doorbell cameras. And your agency recently put out a correspondence saying, quote, during a 3-month period in 2017, a Ring employee viewed thousands of videos of female users in their bedrooms and bathrooms, including videos of Ring's own employees. There was also at Ring, according to the FTC, an unauthorized tunnel that allowed a Ukraine-based contractor to access consumer videos. An incident where a Ring employee gave information about a customer's to their ex-husband was also something that you uncovered. You also state that bad actors at Ring took advantage of the camera's two-way communication functionality to harass and threaten people who used Ring cameras. There was a case where an 87-year-old woman at an assisted living facility was sexually propositioned through Ring's two-way features. Kids were subject to racial slurs. A hacker got in and threatened a family with physical harm if they did not pay a Bitcoin ransom. And one hacker even communicated through the two-way feature to a customer that they had already killed the customer's mother and, quote, "Tonight you die." What is going on at Ring?
So as you noted, we recently took enforcement action precisely because of these very serious lapses in data privacy, which endangered Americans in their day-to-day lives. Overall, looking at some of these surveillance devices and how they can be misused and abused is a top area of focus for us because people's privacy is paramount.
Yeah, I thought that when people got Ring, it was to enhance their personal security, not to have their 87-year-old relative in an ALF sexually propositioned, their children to be slurred at, and then to be told that they were going to be killed if they didn't pay Bitcoin ransom. So thank you for that effort. Kochava. Kochava is one of these data brokers that you're going after, right?
That's right.
And the American people should know that Kochava geolocates where people go to church, and then they sell that data to commercial enterprises, right?
That's right.
That's real creepy, isn't it?
I believe most people would have that reaction, yes.
I got onto the FBI director yesterday for their creepy FISA activity, and now we have Kochava literally selling to people, oh, well, this is a Baptist, this is a Methodist, this is someone who goes to temple. Are you going to get these people and stop them?
So we have a pending lawsuit. We filed it last year. The court dismissed it. They gave us the opportunity to refile. We just refiled an amended complaint. And we think it's urgent to act here because, the types of stigmatization and harms that can stem from being able to track and sell people's sensitive geolocation information is just critical for us to be addressed.
We didn't like it when the FBI was wanting to infiltrate the Catholic churches, and I don't know that I want the data brokers to do the same. And by the way, we've even seen how the FBI is using the data brokers to do an end run around the Fourth Amendment. So I really want to encourage your work in this space, and I hope that your litigation against Kochava is something that creates precedent. And you know what? There's been criticism of some of your losses in court, but we as sophisticated lawyers know sometimes that a motion to dismiss an initial complaint can create a pathway to an amended complaint to achieve relief. And so if the laws are insufficient to stop data brokers from selling information about where my constituents worship, and if the laws are insufficient to stop Ring from these activities, I really hope you'll work with us to change those laws. And all of Mr. Buck's points are really central to this, because if Congress is bought off, if people are just coming here to beat you up over what email account you use or what trip you've been on to Europe, I think it misses these things that are far more central to the life that our constituents lead. Thank you for your work. Agree with both.
I appreciate
well, let's get a bill, Mr. Chairman, to deal with those data brokers.
We're working with the gentlelady who just went right before you to do just that. That is something that I think this committee can hopefully agree on. And I neglected to mention this earlier, Madam Chair. We've been at this hour and a half. If you need a break at any time, just let us know. If not, we can keep going.